Nah, what he said is just disrespectful. On a recent episode of the Pat McAfee Show, Shaq said something about Wembanyama that has Spurs fans absolutely fired up. We gotta get into that. Plus, trade talks are escalating, and a recent article from Bleacher Report sends Brandon Ingram to the San Antonio Spurs in exchange for some interesting names. We're going to get into all that coming up on this episode of Spurs Digest. But guys, as always, before we get into it, I wish this number was changing, but it's not. 94.9, 95% of you watching this video are not subscribed, and we want to hit 1,000 subscribers before the season. We're only like 350 away. So if you like our daily Spurs content and you want your new home for all things San Antonio Spurs, hit that subscribe button down below. We'd sincerely appreciate it. Road to 1,000, baby. Let's get right into this video. I gotta start with this trade that Bleacher Report has proposed, and it comes from Andy Bailey. Now, Brandon Ingram, he's been in trade talks for various reasons. Does he want out of New Orleans? The pairing there is they're not really sure if Zion Williamson's going to be super healthy. There's a lot of trade speculation coming out of New Orleans recently, but recently for Bleacher Report, I'm going to get into an article of some teams that he mentioned, and, well, the Spurs were included within them. So let's just get right into this here. Brandon Ingram landing spots if New Orleans Pelicans trade the star forward. There are a lot of rumors sending Brandon Ingram basically everywhere in the NBA, it feels like. But one place that he did mention is the San Antonio Spurs. And let's just get into some of the quotes that he had to say. We're going to dive right into this there. He said there are good salary filler type contracts on the Spurs, one of which is attached to a center. He's talking about Zach Collins. But you got Harrison Barnes, you got Keldon Johnson, and of course Collins would probably jump over Yves Missy and Daniel Tice on the depth chart in terms of forwards. He goes on to say that in terms of basketball fit, look, it might not be ideal. Ingram might commandeer some possessions away from Wemby, Vassell, or Chris Paul, but he can give the Spurs a consistent 20-point-per-night scorer who'd take a little pressure off the rising star. And look, Brandon Ingram is a very solid player, obviously. He's very, very talented in the NBA. There's a reason that he got his max contract. The question is, would he fit in with the Spurs? Now, the Spurs have a lot of cap flexibility. Well, at least for now, they have enough, right? Wemby's still on that rookie deal. Devin Vassell, well, he didn't accept the max. He went a little bit below the max, and especially if you move out of contract like Keldon, you move out of Harrison Barnes, even though he kind of just got here, you could make this kind of work. And look, I'm not totally sold that this is a bad basketball fit. I think it's only a bad basketball fit if Ingram truly doesn't want to play that kind of off-ball role. Don't forget, this guy has been over 20 points per game for many seasons. He was fairly efficient last season too, and again, that's as a primary scorer. Now, how he would necessarily play as maybe primarily off-ball, even though, you could argue he'd be one of the Spurs' top on-ball scorers too. He'd still be getting ISO possessions and stuff like that. But I think where he'd thrive the most is kind of moving around a bit off-ball, having Chris Paul, having Wemby find him for open looks, having the defense focus on these guys, leaving Ingram kind of open. Because, that's kind of the problem the Spurs are going to end up, inducing into a lot of teams. It's well, what do you do if you have Wemby, whether it's in the high post, whether it's down low? Oh, we'll get into what Shaq said in a minute. That keeps coming back to mind. But, you have a guy like Ingram off ball as well. You're not going to ever be able to double him, really. I just think it actually makes sense in terms of just play style. As for, again, like I said, whether he would want to do it, that's yet to be seen. But adding a 20-point per game score, even though he's very expensive, the Spurs could make it happen. Though at the same time, I'm not sold this is a move for long-term success. This would make the Spurs much more competitive right away. But is Ingram that guy that you want to spend this kind of money on? Again, he's really not bad. He could very well be worth the contract, and if he buys into the Spurs system, like we've seen with a lot of other guys, it could really work out if he takes that time to kind of fit in. But let me know what you guys think down below. Could the Spurs go after Brandon Ingram again? I'm not sold on this being a great trade, though, it is a little tempting when you look at his numbers and you kind of visualize the Spurs with more and more talented players as it goes on. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys down below. Let me know. But we're going to move on to the crux of this video. Look, I'm sure a lot of you people have seen this. Yeah, Shaq he's on a hate rampage right now. I don't know what it is. He called Rudy Gobert and Ben Simmons two of the worst players in NBA history. Not in terms of just worst talent. Even though the question was phrased worse, he basically said, you're not worth your money. He's like, Rudy, you get paid $250. $250 million. Go show me $250 million, which, I guess fair, but Rudy's also one of the best defenders in the league. We're not going to get into the Rudy Gobert discussion. What we are going to get into, though, is the San Antonio Spurs discussion. So, of course, he was on the Pat McAfee show, and, well, you know what? I'll just pull up the quote. So let's bring this up. He basically said that Wemby is a great player, but I don't really think you can be dominant when you shoot jumpers a lot. I think if he was an inside player at 7'5", then the answer is yes, but when you shoot jumpers, you're always going to go up and down. Coach will tell you that. talking about how Wemby can't be as dominant as him. Now, he goes on to describe what he means by dominance is in terms of him, like, my dominance was, we're terrified of him. We have to change the rules for him. Nothing we can do can stop him. We're going to bring in extra players to stop them, and you have to be consistent with all those things at least 5, 6, 7 years. So, look, I mean, it's not the most insane take for that to be what you define as dominance, but to say a player can't be dominant on a basketball court because they're not as, I guess, physically imposing as you is a really disingenuous, I think. And I think most people agree. Like, you don't have to be a Shaq level force to be dominant. Now, again, if Shaq is defining it as physical dominance, sure, but that's not what he said. He said if you shoot jumpers, you're going to go up and down a lot. He's implying the fact that because Wemby shoots jumpers, there are going to be more games where he, say, has an off night, as opposed to Shaq, who was, I mean, I'm sure he had off nights, but he's saying he had way fewer because, you know, if you're inside in the paint, 7'5", you're doing putbacks, you're dunking on absolutely everyone, you're much less prone to an off shooting night, if that makes sense. But at the same time, like, Wemby is doing things we have literally never seen in the NBA. Wemby is getting praise from players that we have not seen for Spurs players in a long time. This guy is an alien, and to be dominant is not just to do that, right? Like, Jokic is dominant. He is, while he's an insane finisher around the rim, he is also dominant in other ways because he controls the game. He forces other teams to change their whole game plan because they can't stop him unless they do something specific. And I think that's what Wemby is primed to do. He already showed lots of flashes of that this past season. And so when you're talking, Shaq, about, you know, having to be so dominant for 5, 6, 7 years, having to change rules and having people say, I can't do anything to stop him, I don't see any world where that doesn't happen with Wemby. Well, I guess I see a world where it doesn't happen. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here. I'm not ready to say he's the guaranteed GOAT or anything, though I am pretty close. When it comes to Wemby, we've already seen him be able to control the game in ridiculous ways. We've already seen people say, like, how do you stop him, right? Was it Giannis who said, tall as Gobert, he plays defense like Gobert, but he can shoot like KD? Like, that's basically it, right? We saw season 1 Wemby. This guy's going to come back with, hopefully, I mean, in an ideal world, of an amazing, effective jumper. If he gets that pull-up mid-range while still playing Defensive Player of the Year level defense, how do you not consider that dominant? And that is changing the game. That's forcing other teams to completely change their game plans. And there was that stat that I saw someone track about, I forget what they called the stat, but it was times where it was kind of an open fast break minus one player under the net. Wemby led the league in people who turned away from the basket when they saw him there on a fast break. He's affecting the game in more ways than just dunking on people like Shaq did. And look, I know Shaq has some good takes, a lot of bad takes. A lot of people are ready to hate on Shaq right now. I don't hate Shaq. I just think this take is a little disrespectful. I think he's coming off right now as a bit of a hater across the NBA, and I think a lot of Spurs fans agree. What do you think? Do you consider Wemby dominant? I don't think anyone's going to say no. I don't think any of you are going to be like, well, no, like, I see what he's saying. If you're talking about, you know, being Shaq size, and you have to be Shaq size to be that physically dominant, or Shaq or Wilt, even he mentioned Wilt, there's like a few players, a few people in the history of the world that could do what those guys did. That is not the definition of dominance. It should not be the definition of dominance. What Wemby will do this year will be the new definition of dominance. We're going to define our own things, and you're going to see exactly what is coming. Let's get ready for the season. I can't wait. We're so close. And if you enjoyed this video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Big time subscribe. Get us to 1,000 subs before the season. We'd really appreciate it because we got this Spurs content, these kind of videos all season long. In the meantime, I've been your host, Josh Gosse. I'll catch you in the next one.